Λοιπόν, καλησπέρα. Εκ μέρους και των τριών φορέων που συνδιοργανώνουν τις φθινοπορεινές διαλέξεις στις κλασικές σπουδές, της Βρετανικής Σχολής στην Αθήνα, του Ινστιτούτου Κλασικών Σπουδών στο Λονδίνο και του Ινστιτούτου Ιστορικών Ερευνών του Εθνικού Ιδρύματος Ερευνών, σας καλωσορίζω στην πέμπτη κατά σειρά διάλεξη της σειράς μας. Για τη φετινή χρονιά, προσκεκλημένος ομιλητής είναι ο κύριος Thonemann, καθηγητής αρχαίας ιστορίας στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Οξφόρδης. Ο κύριος Thonemann παρακολούθησε και ολοκλήρωσε τις προπτυχιακές του σπουδές στο κολέγιο Lady Margaret Hall της Οξφόρδης, μελετώντας ελληνική και λατινική γραμματεία, φιλοσοφία και ιστορία. Στα πρώτα του ακαδημαϊκά βήματα μαθήτεψε δίπλα στον Simon Price, εμβληματικό μελετητή της ιστορίας των θρησκειών του ελληνορωμαϊκού κόσμου, του οποίου το περίφημο βιβλίο Rituals and Power άλλαξε σημαντικά την αντίληψή μας για την αυτοκρατορική λατρεία. Με τον Simon Price, ο Thonemann συνέγραψε το 2010, όταν ο ίδιος ήταν περίπου 30 ετών, και ένα χρόνο πριν τον πρόωρο θάνατο του δασκάλου του, τη μονογραφία The Birth of Classical Europe, η οποία αφενός δίνει ένα συνοπτικό περίγραμμα της ιστορίας του αρχαίου κόσμου, από την άλωση της Τρίας έως την πτώση της Ρωμαϊκής Αυτοκρατορίας, και αφετέρου διαρευνά το ρόλο της μνήμης στην αντίληψη που είχαν οι αρχαίοι για τον εαυτό τους και το παρελθόν τους. Έχοντας πάρει γερές βάσεις στις κλασικές σπουδές και στη μελέτη των ελληνικών και λατινικών κειμένων σε προπτυχιακό επίπεδο, ο ομιλητής μας στράφηκε στην αρχαία ιστορία, ολοκλήρωσε τις μεταπτυχιακές του σπουδές και έλαβε το διδακτορικό του δίπλωμα από το All Souls College του Πανεπιστημίου της Οξφόρδης το 2007. Η διατριβή του για την ιστορική γεωγραφία της κοιλάδας του Μεάνδρου στη Μικρά Ασία δημοσιεύτηκε το 2011 από την Cambridge University Press με τον τίτλο The Meander Valley, An Historical Geography from Antiquity to Byzantium και επανεκδόθηκε το 2015. Το βιβλίο βραβεύτηκε από την αγγλοελληνική εταιρεία με το Runciman Prize. Κατά τη διάρκεια της προετοιμασίας της διδακτορικής του διατριβής, ο Thonemann έλαβε διακρίσεις και υποτροφίες τόσο από το πανεπιστήμιό του, όσο και από την Kommission für Alte Geschichte und Epigraphik του Μονάχου, ενός από τα σημαντικότερα κέντρα μελέτης της αρχαίας ιστορίας και επιγραφικής. Από το 2007 έως σήμερα, ο Thonemann διδάσκει αρχαία ιστορία στο Wadham College του Πανεπιστημίου της Οξφόρδης, όπου έλαβε πρόσφατα και τον τίτλο του καθηγητή. Πλέον της τακτικής του διδασκαλίας διευθύνει το Wadham's Classical Summer School, που απευθύνεται σε φοιτητές που επιθυμούν να παρακολουθήσουν εντατικά καλοκαιρινά μαθήματα εκτός του τακτικού προγράμματος, και συμμετέχει επίσης στο πρόγραμμα Access, που προφέρει δωρεάν tutoring σε ικανούς νέους από μη προνομιούχα περιβάλλοντα που επιθυμούν να βελτιώσουν τις επιδόσεις τους για να στοχεύσουν σε υψηλού επίπεδου πανεπιστημιακές σπουδές. Είναι φανερό πως, ακολουθώντας την αγγλοσαξονική παράδοση, ο σημερινός μας ομιλητής θεωρεί την διδασκαλία σημαντικό τμήμα της ακαδημαϊκής του σταδιοδρομίας. Τα ερευνητικά ενδιαφέροντα του Thonemann εστιάζονται κατά κύριο λόγο στην περιοχή της Μικράς Ασίας κατά την ελληνιστική και ρωμαϊκή περίοδο. Γύρω από αυτή τη θεματολογία, πέραν της διατριβής του, έχει εκδώσει 2 συλλογικούς τόμους, ένα σύνταγμα επιγραφών και άλλων αρχαιολογικών μνημείων, και έχει δημοσιεύσει περί τα 45 άρθρα και μελέτες που αφορούν την επιγραφική, την προσωπογραφία, την νομισματική και την ιστορία. Το βιβλίο Atali Deja Minor, Money, International Relations and the State, που δημοσιεύτηκε υπό τη διεύθυνσή του το 2013, περιλαμβάνει 8 συνθετικά κεφάλαια, γραμμένα από 8 διαφορετικούς συγγραφείς, που εστιάζουν κυρίως σε θέματα θεσμών και οικονομίας του Βασιλείου των Αταλιδών. Το περιεκτικό αυτό βιβλίο αποτελεί την πιο πρόσφατη σύνθεση που διαθέτουμε για το Ελληνιστικό Βασίλειο. Ο συλλογικός τόμος Roman Phrygia, Culture and Society, που εκδόθηκε την ίδια χρονιά, έχει περισσότερο αρχαιολογική κατεύθυνση. Είναι το αποτέλεσμα ενός συνεδρίου που πραγματοποιήθηκε στο πλαίσιο του προγράμματος Monumenta Asia Minoris Antiqua 11. Το πρόγραμμα, γνωστό με το ακρονίμιο MAMA, συνεχίζει μια σειρά που ξεκίνησε το 1925, πριν από σχεδόν έναν αιώνα, και είχε ως στόχο τη δημοσίευση των ορατών μνημείων και επιγραφών της Μικράς Ασίας, της Ρωμαϊκής και πρώιμης Βυζαντινής περίοδου. Ο τόμος 11, που επιμελήθηκε ο κύριος Thonemann με άλλους συνεργάτες, βασίστηκε στο ανέκδοτο αρχείο του Michael Ballas, ο οποίος περιηγήθηκε την ενδοχώρα της Ανατολίας τη δεκαετία του 50 και συνέλεξε, κατέγραψε και αποτύπωσε μνημεία από τις περιοχές της Φρυγίας, της Λικαονίας και της Καπαδοκίας. Η δημοσίευση του αρχείου, η οποία πραγματοποιήθηκε σε συνεργασία με το Center of Study of Ancient Documents της Οξφόρδης, αποτελεί μια πολύ σημαντική προσφορά, ειδικά καθώς το μεγάλο μέρος αυτού του υλικού είναι σήμερα χαμένο. Πέραν της ανασχόλησής του με τις επιγραφές, τα μνημεία και την ιστορία της Μικράς Ασίας, ο Thonemann έχει γράψει 2 σύντομα βιβλία που αφορούν την ελληνιστική εποχή και θα μπορούσε κανείς να τα αποκαλέσει εγχειρίδια. Το πρώτο είναι μια ενδιαφέρουσα σύνθεση για τα νομίσματα της ελληνιστικής περίοδου και τη χρήση τους από τον ιστορικό. The Hellenistic World Using Coins and Sources. Είναι ένα βιβλίο που, όπως και το αντίστοιχο Τάου Τζίγκο, θα μπορούσε και να μεταφραστεί στα ελληνικά για το κοινό των φοιτητών. Το δεύτερο είναι μια σύντομη περιεκτική σύνθεση για την ελληνιστική ιστορία. Στους αμέσως επόμενους μήνες αναμένεται να εκδοθούν 2 μελέτες του για έναν συγγραφέα που έζησε το 2ο αιώνα μετά Χριστόν και ασχολήθηκε με την ερμηνεία των ονείρων, τον Αρτεμίδωρο, τον Δαλδιανό. Σήμερα ο Πίτερ Thonemann όμως δεν θα μας μιλήσει για τα όνειρα, θα μας μιλήσει για μια σημαντική επιγραφή, το 2ο μέρος της οποίας παρουσιάζεται εδώ για πρώτη φορά. Η επιγραφή βρέθηκε στην Ιωνική Τέο, μια πόλη που τοποθετείται στα δυτικά παράλια της Μικράς Ασίας, βορείως της Άμμου. Τον ευχαριστούμε που αποδέχθηκε την πρόσκλησή μας και τον καλούμε στο βήμα. Dear Peter, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and call you to take the floor. Thank you.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, φίλοι και συνάδελφοι, οφείλω να ξεκινήσω ζητώντας σας συγγνώμη που θα μιλήσω στα αγγλικά. Δυστυχώς, υπολείπομαι της νέας ελληνικής. Ελπίζω να με συγχωρήσετε και να μπορέσετε να παρακολουθήσετε το συλλογισμό μου. It's a very great honor and a great pleasure to be delivering this year's autumn lecture in classics. I'm very grateful indeed to Dr. Sofia Kremidi and my friend Dr. Mirina Kalaitsi for the invitation to come and speak to you this evening. I'm also very grateful to Professor John Bennett at the British School at Athens and Professor Greg Wolfe at the Institute of Classical Studies in London for their assistance in supporting this evening's event. I should say that, as you can probably see at the moment, that I tremble with fear to be delivering a paper on Greek epigraphy before an audience that contains so many of my own epigraphic heroes, and in particular to be delivering a paper on the epigraphy of Aegean Thrace before a phalanx of all of the most distinguished epigraphists of Aegean Thrace sitting threateningly in this corner in front of me. Among the many names of friends, colleagues, and very fine scholars in the audience this evening, I would like, if I may, just to single out one person who I'm particularly honoured and particularly frightened to see in the audience, one of the very greatest of all Greek historians, a man whose extraordinary work on classical and Hellenistic Macedonia is now the unshakable foundation of all future work on the history of Macedon, one of my own academic heroes, Professor Miltiadis Hatzopoulos. And it is with the Kingdom of Macedon, of Antigonid Macedon, that I should like to begin, and in particular with its end. The Third Macedonian War was fought between 171 and 168 BC, between Rome and King Perseus of Macedon. A particularly brutal conflict drawn out over almost 4 years. It ended in the total defeat of King Perseus of Macedon, the last Antigonid king, at the Battle of Pydna and the dissolution of the Macedonian kingdom. In the second year of this war, as we're told by the Roman historian Livy, in high summer 170 BC, an embassy from the northern Greek city of Abdera arrived in Rome. An embassy from Abdera, we're told, arrived in Rome and stood weeping in the porch of the Senate House, protesting that their city had been stormed and sacked by the Roman fleet commander, Lucius Hortensius. Abdera, an ancient and famous Greek polis, and also a friend to the Roman people. Hortensius, on arriving at Abdera, had demanded that the city provide him with a vast sum of money and grain, and when the city failed to do so immediately, he sacked the city, beheaded the leading Abderites, and enslaved the rest of the city's population. The Senate, so Livy tells us, was furious. They sent 2 commissioners to restore Abdera to freedom, to tell Hortensius that his behaviour was an outrage, and ordered that all those Abderites who had been enslaved should be set free. A gloomy story with which to begin, but not a unique one. As I'm sure you all know, in the ancient Greek world, the sack of cities, the enslavement of their people was, if you like, an everyday occurrence. In Homer's Iliad, as when the smoke rises to the sky from a far-off city on an island which foes have surrounded in war, and all day long they struggle as hateful Ares commands. Or again in the Odyssey, as when a woman falls on the body of her husband killed in battle, listens to how he gasps his life away, clings to his body crying, but they, beating her back and shoulders with their spear butts, drag her away to slavery to learn of toil and pain. Note that, for Homer, these are just similes. The kind of thing that happens every day that you can compare any other event to. This was the fate of Thebes in 335 BC, sacked by Alexander, inhabitants sold into slavery. The fate of Corinth in 146 BC, destroyed by the Roman general Mummius. The fate of Athens itself, sacked by the Roman general Sulla in 86 BC. The destruction of Abdera in 170 BC, the enslavement of its population, was terrible, but it was not unusual. Until very recently, Livy's short account was all that we knew about this melancholy episode on the fringes of the Third Macedonian War. At best, it has usually merited no more than a footnote, if that, in modern histories of Rome's war with Perseus. I believe that will change. In March 2018, spring last year, I was on holiday in Cornwall, staying here. A very beautiful house on the South Cornish coast. I'm afraid I can't afford to stay in a house like this. This was an undergraduate reading party. I took 12 of my undergraduate students to Cornwall for a week, and we were spending a very pleasant week in this house reading Plato's Gorgias together, as it happens. One morning, in fact, when I was walking up from this rather attractive beach down here, back up to the house, my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I opened it up to find an email from my dear friend Mustafa Adak, Professor of Ancient History at the Museum of Antalya. A very wonderful man, Mustafa, many of you will know him, a passionate European, passionate Philhellene, man who spends every summer holiday on Kos with his wife, a very, very wonderful man and a very great scholar. And Mustafa has been for many years the chief epigraphist at the site of Teos in Ionia, currently being excavated, very impressively excavated, under the direction of Professor Musa Kadaoğlu of the University of Ankara. You see here the foundations of the famous Temple of Dionysus, Dionysos at Teos, constructed by the architect Hermogenes, probably in the very early 2nd century BC, currently being excavated by the Ankara team. Anyway, in his email, Mustafa wrote to tell me that a very large new inscription had just been discovered during the Turkish excavations near the main civic temple of Teos, the temple of Dionysos. It was a very long text in extremely difficult, very elaborate, very rhetorical Greek. Might I be interested in preparing it for publication? I flicked on in my phone to have a look at the photographs that he sent me, this one in particular. It didn't take me very long to say yes. Over the following days, as I worked my way through the text, there gradually emerged, word by word, the full story of the sack of Abdera in 170 BC, and the city's slow recovery and return to prosperity. And it is a truly extraordinary story. In years to come, among historians of the Hellenistic Greek world, this inscription will be famous. And I'm very grateful to Mustafa Bey for his agreement that I can present the new text in public for the first time this evening. The new inscription, as you can see, is a colossal marble stele. Originally, we think, around 2.75 meters in height, very tall indeed, 60 centimeters wide and 30 centimeters thick. As you can see, an absolutely colossal piece of marble, one of the very largest inscribed stelae known to us from the Hellenistic world. This must have been a major landmark in the sanctuary of Dionysos at Teos. As you can see, two large fragments of the stele survive, and more fragments may yet turn up in future excavations at Teos. In fact, this little corner of the pediment up here turned up in excavations about 6 weeks ago. So there's good chance that some of the missing parts of the text may turn up in years to come. Because of the very slight tapering of the stele, it's very slightly triangular shaped, we can estimate with more or less certainty how much is missing from the central part of the stele. It's around 15 lines missing here. At the bottom of the lower fragment, the new fragment of the text, you can, I hope, see that we have a small uninscribed space at the bottom, so I suspect we have the original bottom of the text. The original text, we can estimate with reasonable certainty, was either 135 or 136 lines long, a very long text indeed. And as we will see, this is one of two copies of this decree, one inscribed and set up at Abdera, the other, this copy, at Teos. So far as I know, no fragments of the Abdera copy have yet turned up. That may in fact be wrong. There is one very small fragment that I'm hoping to see in the museum at Abdera later this week, which may be a small fragment of this text. We live in hope that the Abdera copy may turn up too. Before I turn to the content of the text itself, I just want to say a very few words about the earlier history of these two cities, Abdera and Teos. Abdera, in coastal Thrace, was originally founded, perhaps in the mid-7th century BC, by the city of Klazomenai in Ionia, just north of Teos. In around 544 BC, at the time of the conquest of Ionia by the Persians, the people of Teos, including the poet Anacreon, fled en masse from the Persian invaders and refounded Abdera as a colony of Teos. The city of Teos seems to have been completely deserted for a period and was eventually itself refounded. It is still, I think, not quite clear when. Teos was refounded by Teians returning from Abdera. So these two cities had an unusually, a uniquely close relationship right from the very beginning. Teos was the mother city of Abdera, but uniquely, Abdera was also the mother city of Teos. Each city was mother to the other. In the 5th century BC and throughout the classical period, these two cities maintained unusually close ties with one another. Here are two early 5th century coins of Teos and Abdera, which, as you can see, share the same types. A right-facing griffin on the coins of Teos, left-facing on the coins of Abdera. And some of these coins are, in fact, overstruck on the other cities' coins, showing that coins circulated between the two cities. A very famous inscription from Teos, dating to the 2nd quarter of the 5th century BC, lists public curses to be performed, arai, to be performed each year by the city of Teos against potential tyrants and criminals. And, as you can see, the curses are to be performed by magistrates at both Teos and Abdera during 3 festivals that seem to be shared between the two cities: the Anthesteria, festival of Dionysos, the Heraclea, and a festival of Zeus. Criminals are to be exiled from both cities, and it seems similar legal institutions are put in place at both cities simultaneously. So in the spheres of religion and law, the two cities effectively act as a single body. 2 centuries later, around 250 BC, these shared laws, shared institutions were still in place. A treaty between Teos and a neighboring community, Kirbissos, also in Ionia, states that anyone who tries to capture a Achaean fort is to be exiled from Teos and from Abdera. I want to emphasize how profoundly unusual this is. These two cities seem, in the classical and Hellenistic periods, to have had a very much closer connection than there normally was between mother city and colony. Laws passed at Teos were also valid at Abdera. The two cities had the same religious festivals, seem also to have enjoyed at some periods a kind of quasi-monetary union. In the classical period, Abdera was certainly a very much larger and more important city than Teos. Under the Athenian Empire, for example, Abdera typically pays 15 talents of tribute a year to Athens, Teos only 6 talents. By the Hellenistic period, that seems to have been reversed. By the early 2nd century BC, Teos has grown into one of the great cities of Asia Minor. Abdera seems to have shrunk into a relatively minor Greek provincial town. As we will see, one of the very remarkable features of our new inscription is that it shows quite how close relations between these two cities continued to be deep into the late Hellenistic period. With that historical context in mind, let us now turn to our new inscription from Teos. You have both the Greek text and an English translation on your handout. I don't know if anyone is live streaming this talk. If you are, I'm sorry you don't have a handout. Please do email me and I will happily send you a text and translation by email. The upper part of this inscription is not, in fact, new. This part, the upper part of the stone, was discovered at the Temple of Dionysos in Teos in 1966, although it was not in fact published until 1997 by Christian Marek, later republished in the corpus of the inscriptions of Aegean Thrace. Marek provided what I think is a very unsatisfactory text with very many misreadings. One should not be too hard on Professor Marek. The text is exceptionally difficult to read. You can see here parts of the text almost impossible to decipher. Very worn indeed. In the pediment, you can see, I hope, up here, a griffin, civic symbol of both Abdera and Teos. At the top of the shaft, an ivy wreath, alluding, of course, to the god Dionysos, the main patron deity of both Abdera and Teos. And within the wreath, the words, "The people of Abdera honor the people, the Demos, of the Teians." So this is an honorific decree, a decree passed by the people of Abdera in honor of the people of Teos. The decree itself begins with a bang. No prescript, no date, straight into the narrative. Since the Teians, the fathers of our city, pateres ontes tis polios imon, have chosen to maintain their ancestral goodwill in both words and deeds, they try to preserve unbroken their eagerness and generosity towards our Demos by struggling, amilomeni, always to add to their benefactions their gift towards us. And in so doing, the people of Teos have made immortal, athanatos, as far as they can, the glory, ephthoxia, that comes to both cities through their like-mindedness, homonia. And they wish, Teos wishes, to leave no possibility that any other Dimi might be able to do better than them in benefactions. Hyperboli ephergesion. And as a result, everyone will be able to see, thanks to the great scale of their generosity, the goodwill of the Tians towards us, which need not only be guessed at, aparastochastos, for those of you who are interested in these things, a new word, a word attested nowhere else in ancient Greek. In fact, this inscription is a real treasure house of very rare, very unusual vocabulary. I think 5 words which are new, appear nowhere else in Greek literature or epigraphy. and some 20 or 25 terms that appear nowhere else in Greek epigraphy. And that, I think, is, it's of some antiquarian interest, but I think is not a coincidence. As you can see just from these first few lines, this text is written in unusually rich rhetorical language. The language of the text, the vocabulary, the syntax, has very little indeed in common with other honorific decrees of the Hellenistic period. Very much of the vocabulary, much of the syntax, in fact, finds its closest parallels, and very close parallels, in the histories of Polybios. There are some 20 or 25 turns of phrase, little rhetorical tricks that appear in this text and which appear in Greek for the first time in Polybios. You'll perhaps remember that Polybios is, of course, an exact contemporary of this text, both writing in the mid-2nd century BC, the time that this text is produced. That is to say, the language of this text is much closer to that of contemporary historiography than it is to contemporary epigraphy, contemporary honorific decrees. The author of this inscription was aiming at a historiographic style rather than a decree style. So, very rich, very rhetorical language. The people of Teos have in the past done things for Abdera that no other city has done for any other city. The omonia between these two cities has no parallels elsewhere in the Greek world, and this brings epdoxia to both cities. The Teans are the pateres of Abdera. Let me lay some emphasis on this. This language, pateres, is found nowhere else in Hellenistic epigraphy. In inscriptions of this kind, you would normally say that another city is your philos, your syngenis, even your ikistis. This kinship term, pateres, is unique in this context. Right from the beginning, the people of Abdera are emphasizing this unusual relationship, unusually close relationship between these two cities. Then, our inscription, after a few lines that are very difficult to read, in line 15, turn to the events. Difficult circumstances at Abdera. Ikeri, called for help from Teos. Fortune, tihi, behaved cruelly towards the affairs of the Demos. The polis of Abdera was left as nothing more than an empty circuit of walls. Peribolos monon tichon I polis, probably apelifthi, or something of the kind. The city had been destroyed. Of the people of Abdera, some lost their lives in the war. Probably here, line 18, an ilosan tus vius, or something of the kind. Others became captives and were enslaved. This is, of course, the terrible sack of Abdera in 170 by the Romans. The city destroyed, many people killed, the rest enslaved, just as Livy says. Please note, and this is, I think, rather sad, that the Abderites here do not mention the Romans by name. They talk about Ikeri, Itihi. Don't forget that in the 160s BC, the Romans are in charge in northern Greece. You cannot say that it was a Roman general that did this. You say this was Tihi, fortune. Rather sad, I think. Then, the last few lines of the first fragment, really just isolated words. Having lost, common need, hearing, the agora, the temples of our gods, judging, join in grieving, our misfortunes, our city. A narrative of the misfortunes of Abdera. Then, a gap of about 15 lines. And then the narrative picks up again. Once again, at first, only isolated words, succeeding, without paying a ransom. As far as they were able, they restored the people of Abdera back to their former condition, collected them from every place, sent them back to their ancestral hearths, estias, and their former state of citizenship, politian. So the Teans, we now learn, must have helped in the process of seeking out, freeing, and bringing back to Abdera all of those Abderites who had been enslaved by the Romans. Yet, says the text, umonon epitosouton, again a Polybian turn of phrase. Not only in this, helping in the return of the exiles, did the philagathia of the Teians, with the goodwill that comes from kinship, show their love for our demos, not only individual assistance that they gave to the people of Abdera in their suffering, but since the passage of time had brought down some parts of the city walls of Abdera, other parts of the walls, the crisis of war, peristasis polemu, had destroyed. Likewise, the temples of the gods needed to be rebuilt, but none of the citizens of Abdera were able to lend the money that was needed for their repair. And so Teos steps in again, thinking both that they would care for their own ancestral gods and that they would help the Abderites by rebuilding the walls. The Teians give them a large sum of money that does not need to be repaid, as much money as present circumstances allowed them to do. Oson ischien αυτό τότε εδίδωσαν οι καιροί. The city of Teos is not rich. It is short of money itself, but it still gives to Abdera a large sum of money as a gift towards the rebuilding of the city walls and the temples. Then the inscription says, time passes to chronu prokopsantos. Again, a Polybian turn of phrase, perhaps several years. The city of Abdera has been rebuilt. The city is returning to a better condition because a moderately large body of citizens, metrion plithos, has been gathered together. But great expense was being incurred for the cultivation of their land. The people of Abdera were struggling in their livelihoods. They have no revenues. Remember, the city of Abdera had been totally abandoned after the Roman sack. The fields were uncultivated, the farmers had no seed, no animals, no oxen to plough their land. And so the demos of Abdera sends once again to Teos and asks them, calls on them to lend a sum of money for the purchase of oxen. The Teians, a very difficult passage here, in fact, the Greek is very hard, short of money, but outstripping all other men in goodwill, lent them 5 talents of silver, interest-free over 5 years, wishing that in no respect the demos of Abdera should lack what they need. So a large sum of money to buy new draft oxen to bring their lands back under cultivation. So far, the Teians have rescued the exiles from slavery, brought them back to their ancestral homes at Abdera. They have given them a large gift of money to pay for the rebuilding of the walls and the temples of the gods. They have lent them another large sum of money to buy oxen to start cultivating their lands again. But now, yet another crisis arises, this time caused by the wicked, evil neighboring city of Maronia. And this time, worse still, there are lawyers involved. The people of Maronia have seized part of the ancestral territory of Abdera, although it did not belong to them, and have entered into a legal dispute over who owns this land. And the inscription tells us the demos of Erythres, here in Ionia, was appointed as judge, dikastis, by decision of the Senate. Remember, again, the territory of Abdera had been abandoned in 170 BC. The next city down the road, Maronia, had seized part of Abdera's territory and now claimed it was theirs. Incidentally, I'm not going to talk about this evening, but Maronia was almost certainly not the only person to seize part of Abdera's territory. We have, I think, very good reason to think that King Cotys of Thrace, Abdera's neighbour to the north, also seized part of Abdera's territory at this point. I'm not going to talk about this evening. An inscription whose date has been very controversial, in my view, absolutely certainly dates to this same period. Cotys and Maronia, at the same point, swoop down like vultures and seize part of the territory of Abdera, very quickly after the sack of 170. Anyway, the people of Abdera appeal to the Roman Senate, and Rome appoints a neutral third-party city, the city of Erythres in Asia Minor, to hear the lawsuit and make a decision between Maronia and Abdera. Teos hears about this lawsuit. They see or hear that the Abderites are being treated with contempt, kataphronoumenous, either by Rome or the Erythraean judges, because they are still poor and weak. The expectation is that Maronea will win, but the Teians do not abandon them, thinking, line 36, that the lands conquered and settled by their own ancestors, tatia ton idion progonon kratithenta ke kat ikistenta, were still their own possessions, idia eavton. And so the people of Teos dedicate all their energies, worthily and magnificently, to the lawsuit over this stretch of land. 400 years ago, it was the people of Teos who conquered this land. This territory was theirs. They were not going to let it be stolen by Maronea and Cotys. And so the Teians choose from among themselves a group of legal experts to put together the legal case that the people of Abdera will use in court. People able to understand all the issues, who will struggle without pause, aperispastos, again a new word, to struggle against the legal claims that Maronea will bring forward in the lawsuit. And the people of Teos appoint from among themselves an advocate. I forget the words, it's syndikos? Ton erunta epitis chrysios, the advocate who will speak in court, a lawyer who will present Abdera's case at the hearing. And the people of Teos completely take over the care of the lawsuit. But this was a very big and complicated case. Abdera might still lose. And when the Teians saw that their single advocate could not take on the case on his own, given the scale of the lawsuit, they sent an embassy to the city of Miletus, so that the Milesians, although a foreign city, could supply the legal expertise which the Teians' own eagerness and ambition could not. And so Teos asks Miletus, as a private favour, is it idiakaris? I can't remember the language. Private favour. Where is this? Charin idian, yeah. To send them another advocate who could help them with the lawsuit. And the Teians pay his fee, misthos, whatever fee he asks for from their own resources. For the Abderites to win their case, they need the world's best advocate. At Miletus, there is a real big-shot lawyer, and luckily Miletus owes Teos a favour. Good lawyers cost money, and this advocate was very expensive, but the Teians pay the bill. And so, finally, thanks to the goodwill of the gods, the goodwill of the Teians, the strength of their legal case, the Demos of Abdera was victorious against Maronea, and they got their land back. And the Teians thereby set up, through their actions, an eternal memorial for all men of their goodwill towards their kinsmen, leaving space for no one else to surpass them in benefactions. And when the party was over, when the lawyers went home, quite a lot richer, the people of Abdera decided it was time to say thank you. And so, line 52, in order that our Demos should be seen to honour worthily, as far as it is able, those who confer benefactions upon it with good fortune, be it resolved by the council and people of Abdera to praise the Teians for the goodwill they hold towards our Demos, and be it resolved to erect a colossal bronze statue of the Demos of the Teians on the Agora at Abdera, in the most prominent spot, pouring a libation with a cantharos with its right hand. I'll talk about that restoration later. With its left arm leaning on the stele on which this decree is inscribed, and let there be a small column standing by on the left-hand side, on which let there be placed a Nike, crowning the Demos of the Teians with an ivy wreath. This is, I believe, the longest description we have from the ancient Greek world of an honorific statue. And I'm going to come back and talk about this amazing statue at the end. In front of this statue, an altar is to be set up, on which the gymnasiarchos, the official in charge of the gymnasium, should sacrifice a victim on 13 anthesterion and hold an athletic contest. The date 13 Anthesterion is significant. We know that in many cities of the Greek world, surely including Abdera, this date falls during the spring festival of Dionysos, the Anthesteria. It seems very likely that this sacrifice and this contest are being added to the existing festival of Dionysos, the Anthesteria at Abdera. The sacred herald is to pray for the gods to give good things to the people of Teos and Abdera. And the Demos of Teos is to be invited to a front seat when they hold the torch race of boys and adults. After the sacrifice, the meat from the victim is given as a prize to the winners in the torch race, so that not only among adult citizens, but that also among younger people, neoteri at Abdera, the honour conferred on the Demos of Teos should be clear to everyone, and so that everyone from the youngest age should feel gratitude towards their benefactors. And the money comes from the public bank at Abdera. And before the contest, the herald announces the Demos crowns the Tean Demos with a gold crown, a bronze statue, because of its virtue and goodwill towards Abdera. So we have a new altar, a new annual sacrifice, and a new annual torch race, lampas, to show the gratitude of Abdera to the people of Teos. I don't have time to talk about this in detail now, but it is, I think, clear that the altar, kata prosopon, tis ikonos, and this sacrifice are literally dedicated and offered to the Demos of the Teans. The Demos of Teos becomes the object of worship at Abdera. To us, that feels very strange, the idea that I might worship the Demos of the Athenians as if it were a god. In fact, this is quite well paralleled in the Hellenistic world, although usually within one city. So at Athens, for instance, there is an Athenian cult of the Demos and Charites set up in 229 BC. Democratia also can be worshipped as a god. Normally, though, this is within a city. The Athenians worship the Demos of the Athenians. This phenomenon, where one city worships another city's Demos as a god, is much more unusual. In fact, I can only find two other examples of this. One is the cult of the Demos of Rhodos. The Rhodians are worshipped in a very few cities as a god around the period of the Rhodian Empire and afterwards in the early 2nd century. And better known, in exactly this period, the early 2nd century BC, many Greek cities worship the Demos of the Romans as a god. But this example of a kind of peer cities, the Demos of Abdera worshipping the Demos of Teos as a god, is, I think, not quite new, but it is very, very unusual. The introduction of a cult of the Demos was, I think, the highest honour that one city could confer on another. And everyone at Abdera participates in this new cult, including young boys, pedes, so that they too might learn to be grateful towards Teos. And finally, so that in Teos too, everyone might learn of these honours, 2 ambassadors, or possibly theori, sacred ambassadors, are chosen every year to travel to Teos, sacrifice on behalf of the people of Abdera a cow as a charisteria, a thank offering to the Demos of Teos, and once again the ambassadors distribute the meat to young men and boys at Teos who are victorious at another Tean festival of Dionysos, the Leucathea. And furthermore, every year, probably every year, the people of Abdera sends to Teos 1,000 medimnoi of wheat. We might remember 50 lines earlier, when Abdera needed oxen to cultivate their land, Teos had sent them the money, and now Abdera sends back to Teos a sacrificial cow and some of the wheat from their land in gratitude. And then at the end, we have a few clauses about publication and financing, and finally, let this decree be in order to show the gratitude, Eucharistia, of the Demos. Okay. I would like to spend the last few minutes of this talk saying just a few words about perhaps of the many extraordinary aspects of this wonderful new text, perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of all, this extraordinary colossal bronze statue of the Demos of Teos set up in the Agora at Abdera. Normally, when the demos is depicted in Greek art, there is a standard conventional way of doing so. I could pick hundreds of examples. Here are two famous examples from classical Athens, where in each case, demos, the personified demos, is depicted as an elderly male, bearded with here shoulder-length hair, wearing a himation, civic dress. In the Hellenistic period, sometimes also a chiton under the himation, sometimes with a staff as well. Essentially depicted as an ordinary elderly member of the citizen body. This colossal bronze statue of the Demos of Teos clearly looks very different. It really does not look like these standard statues of the Demos that we know and love from classical Athens. What do we know? He is pouring a libation with his right hand, probably, we'll see why in a moment, why I've restored this word, with a kantharos. With his left arm, he is resting. The word used, apirismenon, usually means, so this could be standing like this, but that verb normally means to lean your weight on something, to rest your weight. So probably he is leaning with his arm, not resting with his hand like this. Resting on the stele on which the decree is inscribed. That has no parallels, so far as I know, anywhere else in the Greek world. The incorporation of the inscription into the form of the statue monument. Behind him, to his left, a little column with a Nike on top, crowning him with an ivy wreath. Significant, I think, that it is an ivy wreath. As we have seen, this was, in fact, a cult statue. Sacrifices are to be performed to the Demos of Teos every year on an altar immediately facing this statue, kata prosupon tis ikonos. And so this description of the colossal bronze statue of the Demos of Teos at Abdera is very important for us, because we have, so far as we know, no extant examples of cult statues of a personified Demos from anywhere else in the Greek world. This is, I think, the first evidence we have for what a cult statue of the Demos might look like. And evidently it does not look like the sober, bearded, elderly Demos of classical Athenian reliefs. Now, this is where things get fun. The patron god of the city of Teos was the god Dionysos. It was to Dionysos that the main temple at Teos was dedicated. Both of the festivals mentioned in our text, at which sacrifices are to be performed to the Demos of Teos, are in fact festivals of Dionysos. Thanks to coins from Teos, we know with absolute certainty what the cult statue of Dionysos at Teos looks like. And it looks like this. A youthful Dionysos, so the young, unbearded Dionysos, wearing an ivy wreath, nude from the waist up, pouring a libation from a kantharos with his right hand, with the left elbow resting on a pedestal. This is a tetradrachm of Teos of the mid-2nd century BC, brand new, unknown before this year. This coin turned up for the first time in March this year in an auction. And I think we can be certain that this is an image not of an epiphany of the god Dionysos, but of his statue because of this architectural element. Because the god is leaning on an architectural element, this shows that this is a statue that is being depicted. Probably, by the way, what we have here is a pedestal that he is leaning on with, I suspect, the old xoanon, the old cult statue of Dionysos perched on top. This is a colossal, new-style Hellenistic statue of Dionysos at Teos with the old, archaic cult statue squeezed in the corner. And we know for certainty that this is the main cult statue of Dionysos at Teos because exactly this same type appears on coins under Hadrian. This is a Hadrianic coin where again you can see a semi-nude Dionysos, Cantharos in the right hand, left arm resting on this same pedestal. The fact that the image is the same under Hadrian shows this must be the famous cult statue of Dionysos at Teos. I believe, incidentally, and this is not important for my argument, but I believe that in fact we have a large number of hitherto unrecognized Roman copies of this Teian cult statue in the form of the so-called Jakobsen type, a very common Roman marble Dionysos type that appears in copies from all over the Roman world. It seems to me, for what it's worth, that these are all copies of this famous cult statue of Dionysos at Teos, but that is an argument for another day. The crucial point is that this new colossal bronze cult statue of the Demos of Teos at Abdera, pouring a libation with a cantharos with the right hand, with the left arm resting on the stele that bears the decree, with an ivy wreath being placed on its head by a Nike, is, in my view, clearly intended to evoke, to recall Dionysos in his capacity specifically as the patron god of Teos. I am not saying that the Demos of Teos is identical to or is identified with Dionysos. But the two figures are clearly in some way being compared, conflated, blurred into one. Thanks to their extraordinary acts of generosity towards Abdera, the Demos of Teos have taken on the characteristics of their own patron god Dionysos. And the people of Abdera honor them just as they honor Dionysos. By the way, you will remember that this bronze statue was described as colossal, and I think we can actually make quite a good guess at what that means in practice. The statue is described as leaning with its left arm on the stele on which the decree is inscribed. Of course, we don't have the original Abdera copy of the decree, only the Teos copy, but the two stones must have been roughly the same size. They have the same number of words on them. So if, with the Teos copy, we think is about 2.75 meters high, if the inscription at Abdera was about the same height, if the statue was leaning on it like that, this bronze statue at Abdera must have been something like 4 meters, maybe 4.5 meters tall, making it one of the biggest honorific statues known to us from the ancient world, right in the middle of the Agora at Abdera, surely one of the chief landmarks of the city of Abdera. I finish. The new inscription from Teos gives us, I think, our longest ancient account of what was involved in the reconstruction of a city after a sack, the seeking out, liberation and return home of the citizens who had been enslaved, the rebuilding of city walls and temples, bringing the land back under cultivation with new draft animals, legal disputes with neighbouring cities and kings over where the boundaries of their territory should lie. For that alone, this is a very precious text, a story of disaster and revival. It also gives us our longest ancient description of an honorific statue, a colossal bronze figure, 4 or 5 meters high, that deliberately blurs the distinction between a Demos, a citizen body, and the god Dionysos, honoured each year with sacrifices and a torch race of boys and young men. But for me, the most inspiring story that this new inscription allows us to tell is a love story, a story of the love between two cities across many centuries. In the spring of 170 BC, Abdera was brutally sacked by a Roman army, its walls torn down, its temples destroyed, its citizens killed or enslaved, its lands stolen by Maronea and others. This was the midnight of Abdera's history. Ketsi, stin pio discolis stigmitis historias, ton Abderon I polis trafike, sti metropolites, tin Teo, Iavoithia. I δύο polis έστρεψαν το βλέμμα βαθιά στο παρελθόν, 400 χρόνια πίσω, στην αρχαία τους φιλία και συγγένεια. Κι όμως, ύστερα από τόσα χρόνια, οι άνθρωποι της Θέος ανταποκρίθηκαν. Από την Ιωνία στη Θράκη, από τη Μικρά Ασία στην Ελλάδα, οι δεσμοί μεταξύ των δύο πόλεων παρέμεναν αθικτοί. Επιτρέψτε μου να σας ευχαριστήσω για την προσοχή και την υπομονή σας.